To understand how bizarre this case is, we have to look at the farm itself. Hinterkaifeck wasn't a town. It was a single, isolated farmstead located about 40 miles north of Munich. It was run by 63-year-old Andreas Gruber, his wife Cecilia, their widowed daughter Victoria, and her 2 young children. The Grubers were not exactly popular. They were known as wealthy, reclusive, and extremely unfriendly. Rumors swirled about dark secrets within the family, including a documented history of incest between Andreas and his daughter Victoria, which had actually landed them both in prison years earlier. They were the kind of neighbors people whispered about, but kept their distance from. But in late 1921, the whispers changed. The family's maid suddenly quit. She packed her bags and fled, terrified, claiming the house was haunted. She swore she heard voices, phantom footsteps in the attic, and strange noises echoing through the walls. Andreas dismissed it, but 6 months later, in March 1922, he couldn't deny it anymore. He started finding strange things. A Munich newspaper he didn't buy appeared in the house. He found scratches on the lock of the tool shed, and then the footprints in the snow. Someone had walked out of the dark woods and into his home, but never left. Andreas told his neighbors about the footprints. They offered him a weapon. They offered to help search the property. Andreas, stubborn to the end, refused. It was the last mistake he ever made. Imagine waking up in the middle of the night, in a secluded farmhouse surrounded by miles of dense, freezing Bavarian forest. You hear footsteps in your attic. You find a newspaper from a city you've never visited sitting on your kitchen table. And outside, in the fresh snow, you find footprints leading towards your home. But none leading away. This isn't a horror movie. This is exactly what happened to the Gruber family in March of 1922. And just days after discovering those footprints, all 6 people living on the farm, including a 2-year-old child and a maid who had just arrived that very afternoon, were brutally slaughtered with a pickaxe. But that's not even the most terrifying part. The most terrifying part is what the killer did after the murders. They didn't run. They stayed. For 3 whole days, the killer lived in the house, ate the family's food, fed their cattle, and slept in their beds, all while the bodies lay stacked in the barn just a few feet away. Today on Infamous Past, we are diving into Germany's most chilling unsolved mystery, the Hinterkaifeck Murders. Who would do this? And more importantly, how did they vanish without a trace? When neighbors finally went to check on the farm on April 4th, they made the gruesome discovery. But the police investigation revealed details that baffled everyone. The killer didn't just murder the family and flee into the night. Evidence showed that whoever did this lived in the house with the corpses for an entire weekend. They lit fires in the oven to keep warm. They ate the family's bread and freshly cut meat from the pantry. They even went out to the barn and fed the cattle. Neighbors reported seeing smoke coming from the chimney over the weekend. One man even walked past the farm at night and saw someone holding a lantern, who immediately shined it in his eyes to blind him before disappearing. Who does that? Who slaughters an entire family and then stays to make breakfast and feed the cows? The police initially suspected robbery, as the Grubers were wealthy. But they quickly abandoned that theory when they found huge amounts of cash and gold coins sitting right out in the open. The killer hadn't touched a single coin. This wasn't about money. This was personal. Suspects ranged from traveling vagrants to angry neighbors. The most popular theory pointed to Lorenz Schlittenbauer, a neighbor who had a brief relationship with Victoria and was rumored to be the father of little Joseph. Lorenz was actually the one who led the search party that found the bodies, and witnesses said he moved around the crime scene suspiciously, unbothered by the horrific sight. Another theory suggested that Victoria's husband, Karl, supposedly killed in World War I, had actually survived, returned home, and snapped upon seeing his wife with another man's child. Friday, March 31st, 1922. A new maid, Maria Baumgartner, arrives at the farm. It is her very first day on the job. She has no idea she is walking into a slaughterhouse. Later that evening, someone lured the family out of the main house and into the barn, one by one. First Andreas, then his wife, then his daughter Victoria, and finally his 7-year-old granddaughter. As each of them entered the dark barn, the killer was waiting in the shadows, holding a mattock, a heavy pickaxe-like farming tool. The killer struck them down, stacked the bodies, covered them with hay, then walked into the main house, into the maid's bedroom. killed Maria on her first night. Finally, into the bedroom of 2-year-old Joseph, who was sleeping peacefully in his crib. 6 people, dead. For 4 days, the outside world noticed nothing. Cecilia missed school. The family missed church. The mail piled up. But here is where the story goes from a tragic crime to an absolute psychological thriller. Over the decades, more than 100 suspects were questioned. The police even sent the victims' skulls to Munich for forensic testing, but during the chaos of World War II, the skulls were lost forever. In 2007, students from the German Police Academy reopened the case using modern criminal investigation techniques. After months of analysis, they concluded that the murders were likely committed by someone with a deep emotional connection to the family. They even agreed on a prime suspect. But out of respect for the living descendants of that suspect, the police academy decided to keep the name a secret. The farm at Hinterkaifeck was torn down in 1923. Today, all that remains is a small stone monument in an empty field. The person who lived in the attic, the person who walked out of the woods, the person who made themselves at home among the dead, got away with it completely. Thanks for watching Infamous Past.